Hello and welcome here on this Wednesday evening, March 19th, 2025. Best of the West, a podcast here for Blake Street Banner, all about the National League West Division. I am your host, Skyler Timmins, joined here by Kenneth Weber, wearing his Toronto Blue Jays hat.
One of many logos for the Toronto Blue Jays. Who comes to mind when you see this logo?
Vladdy Sr.
Vladdy Sr.? He never even played for the Blue Jays. But all right then. Good call.
Oh, okay, yeah. Expos is what I'm thinking of.
That was last week's hat. Yeah. But that's what we'll start
I'm
coming
1
up
week
with.
behind.
Yeah. Who came to mind with last week's hat? That's the game. So you're gonna have a whole week to think about that.
Yeah, I'll be rigorously Googling every week.
Yeah.
But report back. But this is Best of the West, and we appreciate you tuning in here, join along here on YouTube and Twitch, and wherever else this may be, streaming over there on X or wherever. But thanks for tuning in as we dive in to the National League West here. And Kenneth will, first things off, and we'll get into some of our quick headlines here, but baseball season has technically started as the Dodgers were playing in Tokyo. We'll get to those in a second, but lots of action going around. But I'll hit you with a couple of quick headlines here, Kenneth, of things happening around the league. Probably a big one. There are now more options for the Dodgers and Giants fans to watch their teams specifically, as each of them has now an in-market streaming option direct to consumers. Giants will have a Giants.tv, as they partnered with NBC, partnered with MLB, so they'll have the same streaming service like the Rockies, Padres, and Diamondbacks have. And then the Dodgers network partnered with MLB to make their Spectrum Plus or whatever it is out there in Los Angeles, a direct-to-consumer thing. It's like, what, $30 a month for people there in the market to stream it, which, good for them.
The Dodgers are one of a handful of franchises in sports in general that I think that can carry the weight of like their own network.
Yeah.
So that's kind of unique and I think noteworthy. I think I don't know about you, but I've kind of stopped paying attention to whose TV contracts are what now, or like there's so many switches and changes going on from the Diamond Sports Group bankruptcy and all that stuff, and then everybody's finances are being affected from it too, more than we ever know. So it's interesting to see all this movement, and one of the more interesting ones I think is with the Nationals and the Orioles are finally like getting a divorce from their sports network, but otherwise there's kind of too much movement to keep up. It's like ballpark naming at this point to me. I don't know anymore. I can't remember. I lost the bandwidth to remember who was where when it comes to ballpark names and sports networks.
Yeah, and all of this is just part of MLB and like Rob Manfred's desire. They're working towards getting rid of blackouts and just creating the single team MLB TV package of, you want to watch strictly your team, here you go, $20 a month, 150 bucks for the season. You can watch your team in market, which it's what everybody's wanted.
It's nice that that's a thing. Like it's depressing that it's 2025 and that's just now in the slow trickles of like being a thing for some. When we've been thinking about, how long have we been crying about blackouts, especially with MLB TV? It's been forever. So it is a step in the right direction. It's just moving at a red tape government bureaucratic pace.
Yeah. And like you're saying, the finances across the league being impacted. Dodgers were already okay with their financials from their lucrative TV project, and so this is just another option for them to continue.
I think with the Dodgers, it starts with the corporate office of hedge fund managers that run the team. I think the money starts there and then goes down. And when it comes to MLB owners talking about how it is disproportionate, that's true. Like, look at the Dodgers and look at the Mets, and just there's more money than God with those franchises.
Yeah. And perhaps this will be very, perhaps an entire country's worth of people will want to buy this sort of package so they can tune in to watch three big stars from their country that they just barely got to see in person with the Dodgers. But yeah, so TV package, every team in the NL West now has their direct-to-consumer streaming option. It's like nearly most of the league has one now. There's only a couple of holdouts thus far, and so it's the new age of
Objectively good.
television here in
Yeah.
baseball.
It is objectively good, though, to have the accessibility. They also came out, I think, with the nationally televised games for the MLB season this year. The Rockies had 2.
Yeah, it's like over there on Fox.
Yeah,
Fox
I think it's
Sports.
also like FS1.
Yeah, it's FS1.
Yeah, the 11 a.m. time slot on a Saturday morning game or something.
Yeah, I think they play on Roku one of those mornings.
Didn't even know Roku had
I
baseball.
think they have a Roku game this year.
I feel like that's a step below nationally televised, to be honest.
Yeah.
I feel like the accessibility is harder that way.
It's free.
Can flip between Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, and the Rockies game.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, they replaced that. I think Roku replaced Peacock's thing that they were doing there on Peacock, but no, Roku will take it and it'll be free for people to watch.
Yep.
Hey.
Do we still have the YouTube games?
No, they do not. I don't think they still have those or the Facebook ones, the Facebook Live ones.
Yeah. Again, it's just they come and go so fast sometimes.
Indeed. But so there's that. Other quick big headline that we can get into. The Giants have a significant investor. They have sold 10% ownership stake to a group called 6th Street to help finance just upgrades and stuff around Oracle Park. Is their biggest investment in quite a while. And so they're getting an influx of cash to just help make renovations to the ballpark, to different aspects, their developmental, complex right there near McCovey Cove and everything. So Giants getting a little bit of some of that nice real estate money to help build up everything around them.
Yeah, and it's such a trend across Major League Baseball that I think a lot of teams just try to emulate that ballpark area, the ballpark district, and not just the stadium entertainment. And with the Rockies, that's one thing that has been pointed out is they were innovative in the fan experience and McGregor Square and everything. Like there's a lot of good things that come with a ballpark district and a lot of revenue ultimately that comes in too. So it's not hard to understand why San Francisco would want to be getting in on that. I think real estate in downtown San Francisco is probably insane. So it's quite a financial commitment. But yeah, it's like you said, it's the short-term influx, so to speak, but hopefully it's a long-term project that builds even more for really a diehard fan base.
Yeah. So the investment, which was approved back on Monday, go towards upgrades to Oracle Park, Giants training facilities in Scottsdale, Arizona, as well as Mission Rock, which is the team's real estate development project across from McCovey Cove. Giants president and CEO Larry Baer called it the first significant investment in 3 decades and said the money would not be spent on players. This is not about a stockpile for the next Aaron Judge, he said. This is about improvements to the ballpark, making big bets on San Francisco and the community around us, and having the firepower to take us into the next generation. So, there you go. Building up their complex. Maybe to hopefully make it more attractive to fans and maybe to bring in some more ball players in the future.
Yeah, I think, maybe somebody like Patrick would be a better person to, present this to. But I think there's still a bit of uncertainty with San Francisco and the city, like overall, because before Pac Bell was a thing, there was some serious concern about San Francisco relocating at some point. And before the Tampa Bay Rays were a franchise, Tampa was used as that relocation. So I think they're in a beautiful ballpark, and I think they are firmly entrenched in San Francisco. Don't get me wrong. But I think some of this still is like, hey, you remember when the city didn't play ball with us and we almost left? This is to show we're more the other way. We're even more cemented in our place here. So I wonder if there is that angle to it with San Francisco in this development part of it.
Yeah. No, but good for them able to build all that up. It's always nice when you get some extra money to build up, at least improve the ballpark and stuff, because it's like a lot of things around the league, they're old ballparks.
Yeah, nobody needs an Oakland Coliseum. We just got done with that saga.
Yeah, invest in your ballpark to make it look nice. It's an important thing. Otherwise, you'll end up either losing it and moving away.
once we get through Tropicana and whatever the hell goes on with the A's moving forward, what's kind of the next dumpy ballpark? Like, 'cause there have been 2 clear-cut atrocities out there. What
Yeah.
happens when, the Athletics and the Rays are situated? Do we look at Cleveland next, you know? So,
Yeah.
I'm
Like,
curious about that too, and, like, ballpark rankings. Who's 3rd worst right now because the worst 2 are so clear-cut?
mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like I'm looking at a list. They put Angel Stadium as 28th behind Tropicana Field and Oakland Coliseum.
I guess, and, like, the Angel Stadium also went the wrong kind of facelift like Oakland did, because Oakland got Mount Davis, and then, Anaheim also kinda took away some of their scenic views, so to speak, with
Mm,
their upgrades, so it is kind of out of time. Maybe Anaheim is the right answer there.
yeah, I don't know. But interesting stuff. Good for the Giants. Hopefully they get some nice upgrades out there with the ballpark and everything out there, and cool to see what happens there. But those are the headlines. There was one other, but we can save that for another time about you, Darvish. Uh, he has some elbow inflammation, so who knows?
He's
But
hurt, and they can't
yeah,
afford to lose him.
yeah, that's pretty much sums it up.
Mhm.
But Sean, welcome here on Best of the West. Skyler Timmins, Kenneth Weber here, and Kenneth. Let's get into our main topics now. First one, the Tokyo series. Los Angeles Dodgers headed out there to Tokyo to take on the Chicago Cubs. They beat them in both games of the series, and Dodgers look like typical Dodgers. They showed off some firepower, showed off some good pitching, and they take down the Cubs in both games. We saw Yoshinobu Yamamoto had the opening day start, quote unquote, opening day start, and looked pretty good in his 5 innings of work. And then Roki Sasaki started game 2, showed some brilliance, also battled his command a little bit, but he did go 3 innings, allowing just 1 run, I believe, with a good number of strikeouts. But not too shabby for the Dodgers there on the starting pitching side with 2 of their big Japanese stars getting to pitch in front of their home crowd.
Yeah, I saw an interesting tweet that went out that said, I think Sasaki and Ryan Pepio are the only starters to ever throw 3 innings or more, strike out 3, walk 5, and only give up 1 hit in their debut. Like it's obviously a very narrow tweet, but it shows it was very good, but kind of all over the place with
Yeah.
Sasaki. So like you said, we learned that Sasaki is going to still have some fine tunements. He's going to need to develop, but the stuff is there to be great.
Yeah.
With these series in general, the Dodgers got 2 wins. The Dodgers showed that they are an awesome baseball team, but it's just so disconnected from the actual start of the season and
Yeah.
the point in the process for everybody that I don't take away a ton from it. Nobody got seriously hurt, and I think that's the biggest takeaway. But I think the Dodgers also showed a ton of precaution over these 2 games to avoid any sort of serious injury. That's kind of the way I viewed it because that's just the way that these series go when there's still another 2 weeks before the season starts.
Yeah. Pitchers are still fine tuning things. The Dodgers walked 15 times in 2 games. Uh, they struck out 18 times. So, in there, they had 3 home runs, 14 hits in total. They scored 10 runs, had 5 doubles. So, a 219 average, going 14 for 64, 363 on base, 438 slugging. So, Dodgers are the top offensive team in the league right now in the regular season after 2 games. But yeah, it's that weird thing where it's regular season games that count in the middle of spring training. There's still a week of spring training left, but they come in, have those games, and then they come back and finish up spring training, or they'll have their freeway series, exhibition series here pretty soon. But yeah, it's such a weird thing of how do you gauge it because there's guys still getting ready for the season, maybe not quite there yet, but Dodgers still came out and did Dodger things. Otani hits a home run, does his thing. Their pitching coming out looking pretty decent out of the gate, which, hey, that's always nice. Even if Sasaki goes 3 innings, but still, they give up just 4 runs on 11 hits in the 2 games, 21 strikeouts, just 8 walks issued. So by and by, the Dodgers did Dodger things there on the mound.
Yeah, and you look at the stat line and the box score for these games, and it reads, at least on the pitching side, like a spring training game.
Yeah.
Offensively, you're not, having the sweeping changes where the entire defense is gone and they're catching up halfway through the inning and who's in now. But yeah, it's spring training stats are already hard enough to gauge how seriously do you take them in the first place, and now you're talking about games that are supposed to matter more in the middle of the entire process. So that's just my overall feelings on it. I think for the Cubs, it showed a lot on the mound. I think that the Dodgers are a good offensive team, but you can't be walking 17 in the first two games of a series and expect to win. But do I think that's going to be a trend, or do I feel that that's a problem for the Cubs? No, because it's two games across the country at 6 a.m. in the middle of March. So that's always baked into all of these answers. But do you fear the Dodgers on any given day? Hell yeah. And this shows why, these two games.
Yeah. Will Smith had 5 walks, no strikeouts in his 4 total at bats recorded, and he had a double. He went 2 for 4 with a double with 5 walks.
Right now, Will Smith is on pace for 81 doubles this year. That should tell you what you need to know about how seriously to take the stats from 2 games.
Yeah. But in the you just saw like the Dodgers just doing their thing. As always, we can expect Shohei Ohtani went 3 for 8, had a double and a home run, continues to do his thing offensively, and only a matter of time till he starts pitching. Michael Conforto came out well in his Dodgers debut, goes 2 for 7, also had a double. So you got Tommy Edman in there who hit a home run. So they got a couple of home runs in there. Kike Hernandez hit a home run. How about that for your trio of home runs? Ohtani, Edman, Hernandez.
Right now, the hitter you feel worst about of everybody you saw was arguably your playoff MVP last year in Teoscar Hernandez. Yeah. So the Dodgers are still fine.
Yeah. And it's just these 2 random games in Japan where really the whole focus is part of being the ambassadors of the game, and then also just for the 3 guys who needed to at least perform well that everybody was there to see in Tokyo. They did their thing. Like, Sasaki struggled a little bit, but he still flashed his brilliance with his 99-mile-an-hour fastballs, his wicked splitter. He showed the goods amid all the walks.
Sasaki may be the biggest name to come over, the biggest pitcher specifically when it's all said and done with his career. But also Yamamoto was no slouch. It wasn't one of the smaller big best foreign pitchers coming over in an offseason. He was up there on the same level as maybe a Darvish, let's say, in terms of recruitment, in terms of MLB readiness, polish, and ceiling. So it is a savvy marketing move by Major League Baseball to have these series across the country. I think if you ask us and we live across the country how we feel about it, it's a much different answer than the people that are set and primed for 162 games in the next 6 months of their lives. The 2 games to kick it off doesn't hold the same meaning. That same way.
Yeah, so the Dodgers, they have their 2-0 record. They now lead the National League West. Kenneth, will the Dodgers ever relinquish that lead now that they have it in the National League West?
No.
Is it safe at this point?
It might be. It genuinely might be. We can look at the schedule. Maybe they have, a 4-game set coming up, the second series of the season or something that could swing things. But it would not be hard to imagine that the Dodgers hold the lead 2 weeks before anybody else plays games and nobody even has a chance to catch them.
Yeah.
That'd be wild. They could set the record for the longest days in first place this season.
There you go. Yeah, it's at some, you hope that some of those other teams like the Diamondbacks and the Padres can ruffle their feathers a little bit. They've tended to be able to do that, but
sure.
But with the way the Dodgers are, it's hard to imagine that just the leg up, even that 2-game leg up at the start of the season, it just gives them an advantage that hard to run them down. Just the way they've run the National League West over the past decade.
Even if somebody does manage to catch them in the first few months of the season, I'm definitely still hammering the over on the Dodgers, odds of winning the division. So
Yeah.
it's I don't know. We'll see how we go, but this was a Dodgers team that was able to rest and choose and pick its spots with the players offensively and on the mound, and they still made fairly routine work of the Cubs.
Yeah.
Now, environment, everything else that we just talked about comes into it, but um, the Dodgers B team, the Dodgers C team can win games on any given night. And we were talking about their rotation and just their injured list. You look at who's on their injured list in their rotation right now, and that's probably better than half of the rotations in baseball, or
Yeah.
a third to half. And so whenever they have their ebbs and flows, they have so many pieces already stacked up and ready to go to help make the lows that much more closer to the mean and make the highs that much higher. That they just
Mhm.
raise their floor so much that I think it's a fair question. What's more likely, that they win over 110 games or under 100 games?
Yeah.
Like,
And
that's the realm you're talking about with the Dodgers.
yeah. And that kind of brings up this next topic of discussion. Wanted to hit up real quick. Also, Max Muncy joins a club of players with a hit in 5 different countries or territories. So a nice
That
little
is
piece of
wild.
history for him. Of all people, Max Muncy. Okay. Uh,
That's wild and insane, and I just love that's an adorable stat.
yeah. It's always those random stats like that where it's the most random names on it. You're like, what the heck?
Yeah, and
Terrence
it's not
McGee
even
had
that.
7 home runs in 3 different countries. What the heck?
Yeah, and I think Max Muncy is that good example of, like, not all MLB, but a good enough player, an all-star-ish player that, yeah, let's send them on some
Yeah.
international tours and stuff too. We don't have to have everybody on our full A squad. Max Muncy is a good substitute for those
Max
kind of
Muncy is
pieces.
good enough.
Yep.
Uh, pretty sure that's his life motto. That's his
Like, good
his
enough to make hundreds of millions, tens of millions in his career.
it's his self motivation every single day. He looks in the mirror and says, "Max Muncy, you are good enough."
Maybe he's talking to the other Max Muncy, the
Yeah.
prospect. Maybe they're FaceTiming.
But we talk about the Dodgers and just how fearsome they are. We want to take a couple minutes here. Dodgers are, we know how fearsome they are. They've run the division for years upon years. They had this big offseason once again. They just keep spending and spending and spending, uh, much to the dismay of a certain Rockies owner. But what are their weaknesses? Where are the little chinks in the armor that you can get to take down the Dodgers? What are their weaknesses, Kenneth? Like, what can teams exploit or hope on that will bring that would bring about the Dodgers' demise?
I think you hope that their bullpen starts showing its age. If you're looking for any crack in the armor, Blake Trinan, Kirby Yates, depending on the health of some other guys that come back, but those are two guys they're going to lean on right away, and those are very veteran arms. There's a lot of miles on there. I think Tanner Scott is something similar too. A lot of money spent for very good players to help bolster their bullpen. I think a lot of people were impressed with the additions of Yates and Scott. Yates, in particular, it wasn't too long ago that he fell off,
Mm-hmm.
and not completely the face of the earth, but he went through the natural life cycle of a major league reliever, which is an all-star 1 year and a borderline waiver candidate the next, So there is some possibility that the bullpen has some shakiness to it. And I think that that could come from just a step backwards from a couple of guys. And then they also will look at it and say, okay, they're thinking they're going to get Grateral back, mid-season, and Phillips. Maybe Kopech is somebody that's able to come in after the first couple months. These are guys that are high strikeout but high volatile, so they could come back a little rusty, So they could be in desperate need of some relief corps help, but also have these volatile pieces that aren't quite up to speed yet. So that could cause some bullpen dilemmas for them in the middle of the season. Now, I also think that the Dodgers are in a perfect position to turn around and add whoever they want to help,
Yeah.
address that issue if and when the time comes. But when I look at this roster, I'm feeling pretty confident everywhere. If I see any blemishes, I see the bullpen probably, having the potential for some hiccups.
Yeah, I think that's kind of been the thing that's probably been the shakiest for them a little bit. That's why they went out and got Michael Kopech, who then just turned into an absolute stud with them down the stretch last season.
Surprise, surprise.
So it's that's probably be the biggest thing, like just a performance side wise, because we know that offense has already shown it's going to be a good offense. If everybody's in it and perform well, that rotation, we'll touch on this in a second, but you see the potential there. If they're on the field, they're going to be performing well, likely. But yeah, it's that bullpen that maybe could be a little shaky. Guys could, and that's the way bullpens are generally. You just don't know what you're going to get on any given night. You hope that, okay, Blake Treinen's back yet again. Like you said, there's a lot of older arms in that pen, and going to test into their depth a little bit. Because, like you said, this is probably the biggest thing that could be the concern or the weakness for the Dodgers, just the general overall health of the team throughout the season. Because you can just go look at their 40-man roster and who's on the injured list. Tony Gonsolin, Grateral, Michael Grove, Edgardo Henriquez. How about that name? Kyle Hurt, Clayton Kershaw, Michael Kopech, Evan Phillips, River Ryan, Emmett Sheehan, Gavin Stone. Those are just the pitchers on the injured list. Plus Shohei Ohtani, who will be coming back in like May or so. But that's a lot of arm power on the injured list.
Yeah.
And in that rotation of guys with injury history in the rotation.
And Dustin May is just coming back, right? So he's fresh off Tommy John and has really kind of yet to get back to regular season action. They've stockpiled a lot of starting pitching depth for this reason, though. So when you look at the rotation, yeah, they're waiting on a Gonsolin. They're waiting maybe on a Kershaw. Kershaw is obviously on his own schedule. But you might be waiting on some guys to return. They know that, though. And so they have stockpiled plenty of other pitchers in the meantime. You may bounce around between a Roki Sasaki and a Shohei Ohtani and maybe a Dustin May. Let's say they all kind of hold the same rotation spot for the first couple of months. Blake Snell is probably going to be a solid the entire way through. Tyler Glasnow might as well. Tyler Glasnow is a health, but they've added a couple of pieces along the way where you feel more confident in the baseline and the floor with this rotation. And then they have, 6 number 2s to fight for 3 spots kind of thing is how this rotation looks. So everybody envies the pitching talent on the starting pitching side. It's not quite there in the relief on the bullpen side. And they also don't have some structured, clear-cut closer. I think they're going to play matchups to the best of their ability, try to put players in positions to succeed. But I think they've also proven that, hey, let's say an Emmett Sheehan he's not going to get the innings on the mound. He's behind too many guys. Oh, all of a sudden he comes up and he is a fire-breathing dragon that they can just start using, and then boom, they have one of the better relievers. I give them more than enough of the benefit of the doubt to create some bullpen pieces if they need to in the season. And then also with the assets, with everything else they do as an organization, if they want to acquire it from outside the organization, that's always in their back pocket with the Dodgers too.
Yeah, that starting rotation, looking at Fangraphs projected wise of just total value, Dodgers are ranked number 1 in starting pitching. With
Tony Gonsolin, I think, had a good amount of relief experience in the bullpen in his first couple seasons too. So maybe he goes, full Adam Wainwright, and hey, we need a reliever. Why don't you just be the closer for an extended stretch? And it's working too well, and that carries on.
Yeah, that bullpen depth wise, Fangraphs their roster positional charting placed Dodgers core 3rd, and so still top 3 in both categories.
Yeah,
you'll be hard pressed to find a position they're not fairly strong at. There's a couple that are a little shaky going into the season, but overall, there's so much firepower, so much talent across the board where it's going to be injuries and testing depth. And we were joking around before we started recording, but it's going to be like, can the Dodgers, I think this season will be a test of how many heads can this Hydra grow before Hercules tries to chop them all off, and take out this monster. How many heads is it going to just fill the screen? And Danny DeVito's like, come on, Herc, you got to get them all.
Well, meanwhile, James Woods sits off to the side laughing maniacally with his head on fire.
Yeah.
You can look at any major league team and point to the bullpen as a possible weakness. Like I think that they're going to be such a force throughout the year that the amount of injuries is going to have to be unheard of. Is going to have to
Yeah.
be more, blow the previous number of man games missed in the season out of the water by 2 or 3 times. That
Mhm.
for the Dodgers to realistically not be in a position to expect anything less than a championship series appearance, something like
Uh-huh.
that. That's just there's too much talent on this team to not be one of the best teams in baseball.
Yeah. It's
That's who they are.
yeah, that's just what they've built themselves up into, which is really impressive.
And we're
And
all
so,
jealous.
yes.
29 other fan bases are still jealous of the Dodgers after 2
Mhm.
games.
Absolutely. So, it's going to be hard, and this will be a conversation I'm sure we revisit at some point of just reevaluating, like, where can we see weaknesses? Who can stop the Dodgers? And so that'll be definitely something to watch throughout the season. A lot of interesting stuff. And I think part of that, too, as we transition a little bit more talking into prospects, they're a team that not so much is relying on prospects. No, they have them in the system, but right now you look at their roster and it's, well, these guys are pretty well established for the most part. That's going to carry the team, and they're not expecting these guys. Probably their top one would be Dalton Rushing, who
Mhm.
is still trying to force his way in camp, force the Dodgers into a decision of some kind, or just figure out what to do with him as the real regular season starts for everybody else.
Yeah. I I think Dalton Rushing, with a guy like him, it's more important to prioritize his playing time than his big league spot.
Mm-hmm.
They've had Austin Barnes, who's the catching Kike Hernandez for this team. He's been on the roster forever somehow.
Yeah.
Um, he needs to fall apart enough offensively for them to force Rushing to be the backup. Otherwise, it's hey, when that injury strikes, really for everybody else in the league, if you lose your starting catcher, you're pretty well screwed for that period of
Mm-hmm.
time. If the Phillies lose JT Realmuto, they're hoping to survive that period of time. If the Dodgers lose Will Smith, now that's finally the opportunity for Dalton Rushing. And would anybody be surprised if Dalton Rushing comes up for 3 weeks and posts 130 OPS plus for the Dodgers and just, you know, goes right into the jet stream that is, Los Angeles? That's I think that's the way that they're set up right now, and it's funny that their one position or their best prospect is the guy behind the one position, that most teams would say we can't lose this guy, so to speak, offensively.
Yeah. Yeah. And like in spring, he hasn't shown out very well in spring training. Pretty pedestrian hitting numbers. 200 average, but he's got a 619 OPS or on base percentage, 300 slugging. So he's not getting the hits, but boy, is he getting on base. 9 walks in his 13 games, just 10 official at bats. He has as many walks as he does official at bats almost. Just 2 hits, one was a double. So he's shown a good patience at the plate. It's just a matter of where would he play anyway, because you're pretty well set at catcher. You're pretty well set at DH, so would have to open up a different avenue for him to play if his bat did. So he's played at first base, which
Mhm.
hey, Freddie Freeman, who's dealing with the rib discomfort, if something keeps him out long term, well, there's an opening for you, so to speak. But it's kind of a wait and see with the Dalton Rushing at the moment of waiting for things to kind of fall in his favor of just unfortunate things to happen on other parts of the roster.
Yeah, it's the same reason why they traded a Keibert Ruiz, is because they didn't have the space to play him, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And I think Rushing is in that situation now. I think that they've also been smart enough to develop some defensive versatility with him over the years, so
Mm-hmm.
he is in a spot to jump into the lineup when at bats do finally open up. But it's a great problem to have. He's not forcing the conversation, maybe the way you would hope he would. But there's enough of a track record, not only in his 2 minor league seasons, 3 really at this point, and his career in the ACC with Louisville that it's a very good ball player. He's shown that he's a hitter up to this point. Now he
Mhm.
just needs an opportunity for it. It kind of may never come within the next 2 years, though, with the way this team is structured. So in that case, he's probably a guy that gets traded for an upgrade. Like, that's what I
Yeah.
would think that the Dodgers would do with him. But it's just, hey, if they're going to need to use him as depth, I think they're prepared to do that. And even though he hasn't had a stellar spring, I think he's shown more than enough, really, in the 4 years that we've watched him play to think he's going to do well if they call on him.
Yeah. Like I said, if something happens to Freddie Freeman, okay, we can call up him and he can get some action or some other type of thing. Something happens to Will Smith, he gets beat up enough. Something happens behind the plate, well, we can plug him in there because we like how he's working with the pitcher. So he's made himself a valuable person. It's just hard to see, well, could he, would he fit on the roster to maximize his playing time and potential? And they said at some point, could be used as just a trade chip.
Yeah, and to further complicate things, okay, let's say it is Freddie Freeman that goes down. Do you think Dalton Rushing is going to put you in a better spot than sliding Max Muncy over to
Yeah.
first base and plugging Chris Taylor or Kike Hernandez into the lineup at third?
Yeah.
You know, that's another part of the problem with the Dodgers. They also have so much veteran depth in between that you kind of need multiple guys at the same time, which is totally possible. It happens to teams every year, and a lot of them don't survive, and that's when they fall out of the playoff push. But you kind of need a perfect storm of bad to make some good for Dalton Rushing, in
Yeah.
this depth chart. And that's just unfortunate for him, which makes you think that a trade is more possible because maybe he's not prepared to wait 2 years. Maybe he's ready now. And
Mhm.
eventually that forces somebody's hand somewhere.
Yeah. Dodgers just always have all these kinds of good problems to have.
Yeah. Now watch somebody completely overpay for Dalton Rushing. The
Yeah.
White Sox get their catcher of the future finally, but the problem is they gave up two aces to do it. That we're
Yeah.
talking about 2 years from now. That's the type of crap that the Dodgers would pull.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also what would happen to the White Sox.
Yeah, true story.
Fernando Tatis, ring a bell for anyone?
Mhm.
Uh,
But was the 2 months of James Shields really worth it?
yeah. That's the thing. Like Dalton Rushing, also like it would pan out where he would do nothing with the White Sox. The Dodgers
Yeah.
would just have that kind of luck.
It's not like Keibert Ruiz is a big name for the Nationals right now. In fact, a lot of people are questioning whether Keibert Ruiz is the catcher of the future for the Nationals. So
Yeah.
really worked out for him there too.
Oh goodness, good old Dodgers. But
Yeah.
enough Dodgers talk. We've spent enough time talking about them here in this episode. Uh, but moving on to the rest of the National League West, a lot of prospect talk is what we wanted to touch on here. If you want to hear more about just the top 100 prospects, you can go check out an article over on BlakeStreetBanner.com. One of their newer writers, I believe
Whitney.
Eli Whitney,
Mhm.
famous author, uh, wrote one up recapping going over the top 100 prospects, and we talked about them a couple weeks ago here on this podcast as well. But I want to just touch on some of the big prospects in camp, in spring training, spring breakouts happened. Dodgers did not play one; theirs got rained out, but everybody else played. San Francisco Giants were the only one who lost their. Oh no, pardon me, it was the Padres. Padres lost theirs. Giants tied with the Rangers in their game, and both Arizona and Colorado won their spring breakout games. So the National League West went what 2-1-1.
Yeah, 2-1-1. It's a nice hockey
Mm-hmm.
week.
And yeah, nice hockey week for them.
Yeah,
But
they lost in overtime.
yep, they lost in the shootout. Yeah, why didn't they end that one with like a home run derby? One
I
that would have been good.
Yeah, maybe that's just more Savannah Bananas land. But there's a part of me that wishes that the home run derby for extra innings was like a part of professional baseball
Hey, it is
or a
for the
bigger
All
part.
Star game,
Yeah,
and we're still
a
waiting on
bigger
that.
part, I should say.
Yeah, but moving around and just checking in on some of the top prospects and just notable prospects around the league. San Francisco Giants, their number one prospect, Bryce Eldridge, not much to talk about with him because he's been out of action for the last couple of weeks from a wrist injury. But he's still one that I'm sure that Giants fans are kind of hoping he can hit the ground running down in spring or at the start of the minor league season, hit the ground running, and then really get that good development and force his way up onto the Giants roster. Because Lamont Wade Jr., to good a player he is, you probably want Eldridge as your first baseman over him.
Yeah, you want Bryce Eldridge to be the superstar of this team, and I think that that's really what they're angling for because they haven't found that. They've been eternally searching since their kind of dynasty era, and the end of Tim Lincecum and Matt Cain to find their guy, their icon, especially with Posey leaving and everything. The next face, and I think Eldridge is kind of, whether it's fair or not, been labeled as that. And it's a precarious spot for them because they are pumping through some decent pitchers along the way. Carson Wisenhunt is on the way with Kyle Harrison, kind of started to establish himself last year. And they have some guys and enough track record of being good on the mound that you're okay with that. The offense hasn't been enough. And Willie Adames is really all they have to show for wanting to spend to improve the offense over recent years, too. So they're still trying to play catch up as an organization. And I think this also reflects the changes of the front office and bringing Buster Posey in. During all of this has been the conversation of the Giants over the past 2 years. Bryce Eldridge has firmly remained the clear 1-1 in this system. And nobody is within, the same stratosphere as him. So it's exciting for them, but it's so many eggs in just one basket. And he's a unique guy that was a two-way prospect that converted to just hitting, which is probably a good thing because it shows the strength of his tool more than anything. And that's being a premier hitter as just a first baseman. But this is a first base or an amateur first base only with 1 year of pro experience to his name. Like that, there's some serious variability that will come into that. So it's exciting, and you hope he's that much closer, and you hope that he really is that much of a game changer because he's kind of spoken in that breath of a James Wood, if this all clicks, it could get crazy. And maybe they'll have that, and it could rejuvenate the organization like Ellie has done for Cincinnati.
Yeah.
But again, all of the eggs are in the Bryce Eldridge basket with them.
Yeah. Before he was reassigned to minor league camp, he went 2 for 11 with 1 home run and 8 strikeouts in 8 Cactus League games. So showed off the home run, but like you said, the inexperience still showing through with all those strikeouts. The bat will still be fine, but it's not quite ready yet, not seasoned enough, despite the big jump in the minors he made last year. Working all the way up to AAA, there's still some growth, still some kinks he can go work out in AAA to start the year, get healthy, get some good reps in under his belt. The Giants will be fine in the meantime. They can afford to wait for him a little bit until he's ready to plug in and then become that star, like you're saying, put him in a position to succeed instead of immediately trying to plug him in and rush him in and kind of put that pressure on. We need you to be our superstar. It's unneeded at this point in time.
And it's a very Rockies move is really what it is. And it's a good thing because his numbers last year, he posted an 890 OPS in 116 games with 23 home runs and 27 doubles. Like, the bat is for real. And he's 6'7". So it's this crazy big frame, this monster at the plate, but he's also only 20 years old. And it's 2 years of pro experience. So are you ready to throw him to the Wolves? Do you think Bryce Eldridge makes you a playoff team this year as opposed to next? That's the first question that you ask yourself with the Giants. And then 2, how badly is it going to screw things up if you force him to the major leagues and he's not ready yet? Do you set back his development? That's a very tough position for a 20-year-old, to handle the future face of the franchise plus win now expectations. I don't think that they're quite ready to put that on him yet.
Yeah, because we kind of see other teams when they do rush up that top prospect. I think it's Spencer Torkelson with the Tigers. He was going to be that top new next face of the franchise, and he's kind of fizzled out. Put up some decent numbers in some areas, but overall he struggled, and partly it's because they kind of rushed him up before he was quite ready. And we see that all teams do this. They just buy into the hype. They get caught up in the hype, and they make those moves because of the hype instead of, well, he actually is ready and ready to contribute and makes us better now to help win. Giants can afford to wait just a little bit on him until he's ready.
How long can they afford to wait is the question. Now, obviously,
Yeah.
all of this has to come with Eldridge keeps on forcing the issue. He has to keep on doing what he's been doing and staying healthy and playing. But it's. I think that this is an evaluation year for a lot of San Francisco, and part of it is, okay, when do we wanna start transitioning to Bryce Eldridge and making him a fixture? I think that this just screams of September call-up. If everything goes well
Yeah.
with them, they can sit and wait, but I think everybody's also a little restless with San Francisco of stagnancy in recent seasons, so
Yeah.
they'll wanna start shifting things around. But again, this is 20. Like, there are plenty of players that have all this helium that go nuts, and then a year later, the conversation about them is completely different, and sometimes out of the top 100, whatever. So you hope that's not the case, but you cannot rule that out. This guy has barely over a year of pro experience. So exciting times, but like I said, it's also nerve-wracking for San Francisco because this needs to be the guy. And it's going to be super cool if it is the guy because he's 6'7" and he's going to be hitting absolute taters into McCovey Cove. And we haven't
Yeah.
seen that since Bonds, minus the 6'7" part. But like that is objectively going to be awesome in baseball again. Just to have some dude that is beating the crap out of a Bay. And we haven't seen that in a couple of years. So I'm hoping for that at the very least.
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of San Francisco fans are hoping for that as well out
Break up the
there in the
kayaks.
Bay. But yeah, and otherwise, before we move on, just San Francisco. Otherwise, all the other stuff will be focused on pitching. Who's going to fill in? You know, they're in that fifth spot in the rotation. A lot of the guys with a year of experience, they're performing well. There's a nice heated battle there in spring training that we'll probably touch on the final results of it next week as rosters will get finalized. But there's some young guns on the way as well. Like you mentioned before, Carson Weisenhunt, Carson Seymour both played well in the spring breakout with some good innings. So there's some prospects on the way in San Francisco. But man, Eldridge
I
will
think
be a
Jason
fun one to
Black is
watch.
still a good pitcher. Yeah,
Yeah.
like the pitching, just you can always just write that in pen. Pitching, fine with San
Mm-hmm.
Francisco. Can they score enough runs? And so, like one name that we were talking about backstage before the show that was supposed to be this guy a couple of years ago was Marco Luciano. This was
Yeah.
supposed to be their dude at shortstop, and they were supposed to be having a possible all-star rep teaming up, and he just never developed. He never kind of quite became the guy. So the rest of the hitting talent that they have behind Bryce Eldridge is A ball stuff. It's still a couple of years away and still very raw. So Eldridge is just jumping into his own timeline from the rest of those guys. But there's not a ton of high upper minors, top 100 prospect stuff banging on the door offensively for this team either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's good old San Francisco. Things to watch, but yeah, clock's ticking. That urgency needs to maybe start picking up a bit for them. But moving out to San Diego, not a whole lot to talk with them. Spring breakout, really their top prospect, some of their top prospects in that spring breakout game. They're really young guys, 17, 18, 19 years old. Ethan Salas and Luis de Vries both played well in the spring breakout game. Really young guys who are still really at the bottom of that system, but proving that they can hit at that age and be competitive. At least just a really cool storyline with the young catcher, the young shortstop. Good to see that for the Padres, who are going to need some of these young prospects in the coming future, very near future.
The Padres and the Spring Breakout series would almost be almost more entertaining to see all of their former prospects in other teams' games.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the state of the position with the Padres because yeah, there's a lot of great original Padres draftees that are in these collections or
Mm-hmm.
or in the prospect rumor mills, but they're all outside of the team now.
Mm-hmm.
So holding on to Salas, who has been one of the bigger celebrities, one of the more known names over the past couple of seasons, just because he showed up at 17 to full season ball, and that's pretty unheard of right now. To see him having success and showing as a hitter when you already know how good he is defensively as a catcher is a big thing for the Padres and something to watch this year. But with the Padres and just the state of their organization, you want to talk about not much knocking on the door in the upper minors for the San Francisco. Oh boy, look at San Diego, because they have been pushing all in for years and years and years. And so now there is just a massive void in their farm system. So
Yeah.
some guys where you do see some high upside, like a Solis and a DeVries, even if it is years away, it's still important to see, steps in the right direction from them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, the Padres system, there's so many guys that just don't stand out, haven't really stood out in spring training, but there is one guy who is knocking on that door trying to win a job. Doing a pretty dang good job of it is Terso Ornelas, who have talked about quite a bit on this show before, but the rookie trying to win an opening day spot in the outfield. And he is outplaying 35-year-old Jason Hayward for that left-handed hitting outfielder left field spot. Because in 20 games, Kenneth, Ornelas is hitting 289, 373 on base, 444 slugging. He's got 6 strikeouts, 6 walks. Does have a home run, just the one though, but 4 doubles. So he's 13 for 45 with 4 doubles, a home run, and 2 ribbies with 6 walks, 6 strikeouts. So not too bad of numbers for a guy trying to make his big league debut after a long time in the minors.
Yeah.
Still trying to finally break through, and he's only 25 years old still. So
Yeah, it's not quite Winton Bernard in terms of the saga through the minor leagues, but I think that this is a reflection of where San Diego is, which is whoever's playing the best is in the lineup.
yeah,
Is the idea, and so Ornelas isn't anything noteworthy in terms of being a prospect. He's not going to be a big game changer, but if he shows up and is somehow Aristides Aquino for a month, for
yeah,
San Diego, they are absolutely putting that on the field. So it's nice because the whole spring battle for positions and camp battles for jobs and stuff like that, I feel like is usually a fabricated topic. Like I think we're usually
mm-hmm.
just kind of plucking around the edges with rosters to see who gets that last spot in the bullpen and stuff like that, but making more out of the conversations than what's really there. If this dude hits, like he is going to be starting in the outfield for as long as he continues to hit, and that's
Yeah,
that's the spot that San Diego's at. So that's pretty cool because not too many guys get these opportunities. The same way we talked about Dalton Rushing needing to try to crack LA's first world insane lineup. The Padres have it the other end where there's a couple of spots where it's open tryouts, guys. Let's go. And so
yeah,
Ornelas is winning that open tryout.
yeah. Because they brought in Connor Joe, they brought in Jason Hayward just to plug in. They're like, oh, we'll just go with this veteran platoon.
Mm-hmm.
But Ornelas has gone out there and he's earned my vote. Heck, let him go for it. See what he can do in the regular season, and just hold it for as long as you can until you have to plug something else in.
Yeah.
For right now.
And obviously, the Pacific Coast League is its own monster for anybody that knows it. But in his numbers last year in the PCL, he did put together 50 extra base hits, slugged 23 home runs and an 864. And this is somebody that's gotten better as a hitter in his pro career. And 25 is not ancient by any means.
Yeah.
But it's a weird range for a prospect because he's definitely not in demand. But if he can help the team win, he's going to be making this roster. So it's a weird place, kind of a quad A player kind of existence.
Yeah, absolutely. Their number 11 prospect coming into this season, and cool to see. I hope he does get that opening day start because that outfield not too shabby with Fernando Tatis Jr. in right. You've got Jackson Merrill in center, and then Ornelas in left field. You could do worse with that outfield by plugging him in there. It could be much worse.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe you found the next late bloomer. Maybe you just found the next Randy Rosarino too. So it's definitely worth a shot if you're San Diego because anything to win that game that day is the mode for the Padres right now, which is captivating. But how long is that going to be sustainable?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so Ornelas doing some good stuff there with San Diego as their number 11 prospect. Could be a rookie. I could see him as a rookie of the year candidate if he can carry what he did last season in AAA, carry what he's doing in spring training, carry that into the regular season. Could be a surprise dark horse. I think I talked about that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, honestly, like if you're a guy that's not expected to even make a roster, but you kind of manage to hold a starting spot all year on a playoff caliber team, that doesn't that kind of automatically put you into the rookie of the year
Yeah,
conversation?
and he
You
puts
know,
up double-digit home runs, like 15 home runs,
might
and
not be the greatest numbers, but if he slashes 250 with like a 310 on base and a 440, he finishes somewhere close to an 800 OPS, about 20 bombs. That's a really good year.
yeah,
Maybe I guess if you're the Padres, that's what you're hoping on, right?
yeah, absolutely.
And
But
not be a total black hole Marcell Ozuna in left field.
yeah,
That too.
absolutely. But moving right along here, and folks, this episode's going to run a little longer than normal, but hey, that's okay. We got plenty to talk about, and we appreciate you tuning in. All three of you that I see here right now.
Oh yeah.
Ah, yeah. And I don't think either of us are the ones that are in the video either.
Yeah, I
Watching
think
on
two of them
YouTube
are my
ourselves.
dogs. Yeah.
But moving along here, out to the desert to Arizona. This is probably the big one. Uh, Lou James Groover, if you know who he is, he had a double and a triple in the spring breakout. That's all we'll say about him. Not much else to there. But the big thing, Kenneth, is Jordan Lawlar was optioned once again down to AAA, and uh, not surprising to me because one, that infield is currently loaded as is with Suarez at third. You've got uh, Perdomo at short, Marte at second, and then Naylor at first. Your everyday starters are pretty much locked in right now. He gets sent to AAA where now he can play every day and continue to get those reps and as he's recovering, getting his feet back under him from the injury last year. But are you concerned that it's once again Lawlar has been optioned and wasn't able to really crack his way through onto the opening day roster?
No. And I think that the Perdomo extension, it started there.
Yeah.
I think it just makes too much sense that he had a lost year, especially because of a wrist injury. So you want to see him get back to the hitter that he was, along with showing that consistency in the rest of his game, like he had been up to that point. That it's time for him to just catch up to where he was, and then continue like nothing happened. While Perdomo has also been proven and has been rewarded for holding down the starting shortstop job in Arizona. I think at this point it's also a reflection that they're changing on the fly a little bit.
Mm.
Lawlar no longer has to be the shortstop of the future. He just needs to get into the lineup. And probably third base when I look at this lineup is what's going to happen if I imagine anything going wrong, aside from, an injury anywhere. It's probably Suarez's defense at third base not working out. And so I think Lawler's just reps and also probably getting him at versatility outside of shortstop. So he's ready for the call at any
Mm-hmm.
of those positions. Him getting demoted, we already knew he had two option years heading into this year. They were going to use one of them this year. They just happen to be right away. He's not going to be on the big league roster. It's not a story. It's not a big story at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, because in spring training, played well, 294 average, had an 897 OPS, home run, had 8 strikeouts, 4 walks. So he was checking a lot of boxes, looked fine. But it's just at this point in the season, or at this point, just go get him the reps down in AAA where you can get some action, get healed up, and get back into the swing of things because there's still things to work on. He's only 22, or he's a young fella, plenty to work on still. But at some point, he's finally got to crack through. And like you said, that gonna have to force their hand in where they plug him into the lineup at some point. Where okay, Suarez, yeah, like you're saying, Suarez defense at third, we can do better, and he can slide in as our more regular DH instead of Randall Grichuk or Lourdes Gurriel Jr. on an off day type thing, or Pavin Smith or whoever.
Mm-hmm.
We can plug in Lawlar, who's the better defender, plug him on the infield somewhere, and we have better defense, and then he's able to finally crack through offensively. So not surprising, but I'm sure there could be fans that are a little worried that it's another one of we're still waiting on this guy to
Yeah.
crack through.
Which is a very real thing. I think that prospect fatigue is absolutely real. And if you want a good example of why some people have that hesitation with them or have that fatigue, it's because of a Brendan Rodgers and how that
Yeah.
all played out with Colorado. So I get that there's the eagerness to finally see him come in and start producing and be a consistent player on this team, because even then they saw him in the World Series, or at least in that playoff run to the World Series, Lawlar was a part of. So um, it's there. He's only 22. He just had a full last year. I understand that patience may not be the first thing that you ask for, but this isn't an organization that needs Jordan Lawlar right now. And I think that that's the whole
Yeah.
point. Is they're fine without Jordan Lawlar. They want to add Jordan Lawlar like he is a big time mid-season acquisition kind of
Yeah.
guy. And it's a perfectly reasonable stance and plan that Arizona has in place that I agree with. It just, is he going to do it? Because right now I close my eyes and I see basically adding Royce Lewis the way the Twins did next to
Mhm.
Carlos Correa. That's kind of what the Diamondbacks are going to try to do. And it doesn't seem like it's a big stretch to think that they'll get there. You just need to let Lawler get his feet wet first this year.
Yeah. He's just got to just develop in the game, I guess, mature in his game, stay healthy, and
Hmm.
take that mindset of building up. Because, yeah, you can get maybe caught up in the hype of I'm the team's number one prospect. I need to push the issue. I need to be competitive and break through and be this big hero for them and change the trajectory of this organization. But maybe that timeout helps him refocus on those things and then understands the plan of, okay, I'm going to go play every day in AAA Reno. I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to do everything right. I'm going to
Yeah.
produce, find success, and then this team's going to call me up and I'm going to do the same thing with them. And
I just
that could be hard for those young guys to do.
Yeah, I also just don't think that Arizona. I think they're probably being very clear and saying we're not asking you to do that. I
Yeah.
think if they're talking to Drew Jones, yes, they need to see more. They need to see a bigger step out of a Drew Jones to kind of believe in who he is as a player and his future um, in the major leagues with Arizona. I don't think there's any questions about that with Jordan Lawlar. I think all of those questions have already kind of been addressed up to this point about him being a big league player for the Diamondbacks in the near future. It's just a matter of you have to kind of amount the quantity of at bats. You need to accumulate a little bit and start getting ready to go to jump into the action right away. That's where they're at with him. Where maybe 3 years ago, yeah, he needed to be that next face of the franchise because they didn't know what they had in a Corbin Carroll yet.
Yeah.
They didn't know what they had in a few other guys. Now he doesn't need to be 1A. He can just be Jordan Lawlar. And I think that's a bit of a luxury. That's a well-run organization, not forcing, and not to say that San Francisco is a poorly run organization, but boy, if Bryce Eldridge doesn't work out, that's a much different story than if Jordan Lawlar can't stay healthy. Arizona will still be in a good spot.
Yeah. And so it's a nice thing of the way to handle it and take some pressure off of him. And it's kind of putting their eggs in a basket. They're still well set on that infield, but now it opens up opportunities where they figure out where to put him, where he can be the most successful and help that team. And hopefully down there in AAA, you can get some more defensive versatility up there in the middle or over at third, wherever they need in the future, because they're pretty locked up there on that infield up the middle with Perdomo and Marte uh, through at least 2027. So,
Yeah. And maybe they're able to develop the next best Swiss Army knife in baseball too while they're
yeah,
at it.
where he's
Maybe.
playing every day, but all over the field.
Hmm. They might have
So,
that on their hands too.
yeah. So we'll hopefully see him, though. If he can crack through, he'd be a guy that we keep saying it could be one of those rookie of the year candidates. But it just depends on when he can get called up and start playing every day and get that action in.
Yeah. I think that there's going to be a pretty big gap in the class between Lawler and the next guy, though. So I
Yeah.
think Lawler is the only one who's kind of, and I think he's the best position to be immediate help of any prospect we're talking about, even better than Rushing for any of these organizations. But then maybe it's a Tommy Troy that takes a step. Maybe Drew Jones does explode this year and he's back into the conversation. But now we're talking about maybe 26 for some of these guys or into 2027. So There's also Lawlar's kind of the last piece of the last class with this team too.
Yeah, because going into 2026, they'll have that opening. Suarez will be a free agent on that infield, so probably the biggest thing. Josh Naylor as well, scheduled to be a free agent, so there will be opportunities to shuffle around that infield into next season as well. So
if they don't retain Naylor, that's going to be interesting. It's going to be a poor man's version of why did you pay so much for Kyle Tucker kind of thing.
Yeah.
For 1 year.
We'll see. But rounding things out here as we'll wind things down here, moving out into Colorado as well. Last and certainly not least, at least on paper in this conversation, the Colorado Rockies, who their whole spring training's really been focused on prospects and who's going to crack the roster. Chase Dollander, probably the top one that we're having conversations about. He's shown his inexperience at times, Kenneth. He's also shown some brilliance, but it's still going to come down to the wire with a couple of these guys. Zach Agnos out in the bullpen and outfielder Zach Veen, but Dollander, unsure if he's going to crack that opening day rotation spot because the Rockies are planning on a 4-man rotation, but could add him if needed.
Yeah, I think if you want to put your put your finger on it and say which way the arrow's pointing, it's down, that he's going to be on the opening day roster, but I don't think they're going to be waiting long for Chase Dollander. And then another name that kind of came into this conversation is Gabriel Hughes. This is somebody who missed missed all of last year with Tommy John, practically all of last year with Tommy John. But this was somebody not too long ago that was near big league ready when they brought him into the system. And if he's showing the same stuff and, possibly even a little bit better than before he went down, I think there is a world where Hughes debuts before Dollander, but Dollander has shown such electricity that he still might be, in terms of just pure potential, the best pitching prospect that Colorado has ever had. So that is at least still there. That conversation is still there with Dollander, and he's not far away. So you feel good, honestly, if you're a Rockies fan, on some of the pitching that's on the way, especially after all of the years of injuries to it. I think Zach Veen is kind of a big story right now. I think Zach Veen really might break camp and be the starting left fielder, and that comes in tandem with Nolan Jones kind of being stinky again. So, yeah, I think that there is a good amount of fire to that smoke with Zach Veen, though, out of anybody in this group.
Yeah, well, Zach Veen kind of falls in that vein of a Jordan Lawlar, where that hyped up. He was the number one prospect for a couple years after he gets drafted, but then the injuries and inconsistency down in the minors kind of throws some hurdles in his way. But every time we'd seen him play on the field, a lot of energy. I think that sometimes plays reckless in a sense where he's just going 110% out. He's stealing bases. He was very aggressive in earlier spring trainings. But then this year, you've seen a different Zach Veen, a mature Zach Veen who understood, okay, I don't have to swing at every first pitch. I can lay off and draw a walk.
I mean, I laugh at that, but I only laugh at that because you say the more mature Zach Veen, but I saw him on TV do a bat flip that almost hit the pitcher in the shin. So
it's like more mature in his approach, maybe not his personality.
Sure. That's just why I laughed. That's all. It's still a dynamic player, though. And you needed that hitter to start adjusting, because that's the thing that's fallen off with Zach Veen over the past couple of years. It was really like how impactful will the bat be? Or is he just going to be like a Travis Jankowski where he just needs to find a way to put the ball in play and then he can be effective? There was kind of some of that concern for Zach Veen in the past 2 seasons. And he has been showing that he has more impact with the bat. Really, it makes sense in layman's terms, but then you have to always throw, the Rockies asterisk into this. There's a choice right now, I think, between Sam Hilliard and Zach Veen, and I think it should be a slam dunk for the Rockies that it should be Zach Veen. And then you walk into the season being able to platoon Nolan Jones and Zach Veen, stack lefties, and then use Jordan Beck on your corner outfield spot. And then you have a top of the lineup that has Zach Veen and Brenton Doyle being just absolute terrorists on the base paths. and being a problem for everybody. And I think that sets a whole new tone for the dynamic of this offense, especially at the top of the order. Will they do that? I don't know. It's the Rockies. But I think that that's at least the same way we talk about forcing conversations with some of these other prospects. Zach Veen has forced a conversation this spring,
Yeah.
and that's awesome.
When you look at all the other prospects who have been reassigned or optioned to minor league camp or down to AAA, Veen has maintained, and he's gone out there and performed. He's gotten plenty of playing time, getting every opportunity to really force his way onto that roster. And there's a conversation where he makes the roster and Jordan Beck gets optioned, and Zach Veen is getting more starts in right field and can spot out in left field and center field as needed as well, because that's why Sam Hilliard's around, is because he can play center field. But so can Zach Veen. And so it's nice to see some of these guys forcing conversations for the Rockies, and they're getting them extended looks to bring it down to the wire. And it's same with Dollander. He'll get maybe one more start on Sunday to maybe force his way into the roster. Or he'll go down and start the year in AAA, but like you said, be back up as soon as possible once he proves he's ready or something else happens. So, but yeah, Veen is knocking on that door, and the Veenster the mean Veen machine is right there.
And this is what was being sold 3 years ago by the Rockies. Is just wait till you see this guy Zach Veen. And excuse me, I think it took a while to come around a little bit, but it finally did to the hitter that we expected him to be. And now he gets to join the group as opposed to being the poster boy, which is what the Rockies were holding him up as. Now there's your own little league hydra of Ezekiel Tovar, Brenton Doyle, and Zach Veen. That's what you dream of. But again, Nolan Jones was in that conversation for a minute, and then he disappeared. So that's at least Zach Veen is looking a lot more like the guy that was being promised would show up at some point than in the past couple of seasons. When it comes to Dollander's situation, one, I think that the team is going to be so sensitive to his success that I don't think they want to rush him on opening day, which fair or not. Also, I think they're probably looking at it and saying, ideally, when we close our eyes, Sensatella, Marquez, Freeland, and Gomber are in the rotation, and we already give a leg up to a Ryan Feltner. So that's also just the Rockies and their loyalties that come into it. But you need a Gabriel Hughes and a Chase Dollander and maybe a Sean Sullivan, as many guys as possible, but at least one of them, and you expect it to be Dollander, to be forcing their way into the big league rotation this year. Because eventually someone's going to be hurt or struggling or both.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's always tough. It gets even tougher in a Rocky situation where you take a picture like Dollander and you wonder, is it more beneficial for him to go down to Albuquerque where
I was just thinking
get beat up? Yeah. Or is it more beneficial for him to just work through those things here with the big league roster against big league hitters, because that's what he's going to face anyway? It's that real tough choice for him. It's like a catch-22.
And same with Hughes. I mean, you probably don't bump Hughes up to AAA after he didn't graduate AA from an arm injury, and then do you want to keep Dollander and Hughes together? I think ideally you start him in a more pitcher-friendly environment, or AA, just let them dominate, honestly, is the feeling. And then I think they shouldn't be afraid to move pitchers to AAA Albuquerque now.
Yeah.
And I think that is just true of them. If you're going to play him at Coors Field, you might as well play him at the PCL, is the general feeling. But it'll be interesting. I think the way it probably goes is you hang out, dominate in AA. The injury happens. We need a guy straight from Hartford to Denver or meet him wherever, and then to AAA after they've kind of had that spot start, after they've had that cup of coffee. Yeah. That's probably the way it plays out, but who knows?
If there is a prospect pitcher that could handle even getting beat up a little bit down in AAA, I think Dollander's that type of guy that maybe could have that mentality of, and just like the mental approach to it of, okay, I'm not going to worry about the numbers, but how did I execute today? Oh, I didn't do very well in this aspect type of thing.
And that's the thing with the PCL is like it's such an albatross when it comes to offensive numbers that it's you take it with a grain of salt. Don't walk guys, and he'll also have the ability to miss bats down there better than anybody else that the Rockies have put. So it's important to also figure out how to do that at a very hitter friendly environment. So I think there are benefits to it. It's something that it's fair to argue how much that's been utilized by the Colorado organization, though.
And to quote one Macho Man Randy Savage, the cream always rises to the top. Oh yeah. Step into a Slim Jim.
I could be able to beat that.
One last thing here with the Rockies prospect. We have to touch on it. Their number 2 prospect, according to MLB Pipeline, Charlie Condon, did break his wrist making a diving catch, rolled over his hand. He will be out for 6 weeks. That's the bad news. The good news, Kenneth, though, is that it's a non-displaced fracture, so it will not require surgery. No ligaments were damaged. It is just a small fracture in his wrist. He'll wear a splint for 4 weeks and then resume some baseball activity, close to around 6 weeks or so. So a late start to his season. He'll get started in May, but a sigh of relief from the Rockies organization because this could have been much worse, and he could have missed a lot more time.
Yeah, no kidding. It's a or it was on a diving play too. So it's just one of those that's a weird freak injury.
Yeah, his
and you're
hand
glad
rolls
it's
under his
just that.
body.
Yeah, you're glad that it's a weird freak injury and not something that was lingering and turned into something bigger. That said, he also wasn't great in his pro debut last year, and a thumb injury was pointed as the cause for that. Last thing you want is this season to be, he was okay, but he never was really there. You don't want the first point to be, well, we didn't really get to see it. Because then that develops a reputation for injury, and this is somebody that they are really baking is a cornerstone hitter, not just a Willie won't he like kind of Benny Montgomery is right now. So glad it's not bigger news, but something to keep an eye on.
You don't want the Chris Bryant comparisons he's already gotten to carry into the reputation that he's always going to be hurt.
At least let him get the Rookie of the Year and the MVP in the World Series first. Get that part done, and then he can turn it into that Chris Bryant.
Yeah, like the bone spur in his finger in his thumb that I guess had origins in college before he got drafted, and just never told the team. And so, and I understand they're competitive. These competitive kids like, oh, I got to play hurt.
He was still pretty great with it, to be fair.
But he struggled in that big league in his pro season, and there's folks that were really worried about that. I would say don't worry about it. And Norm points out here, you hope he doesn't become Royce Lewis, which would be very unfortunate.
No kidding.
Like you said, let the Chris Bryant comparison stop with the player that he is, not the injury history.
Sure.
You don't want that reputation, because then it feels like, especially with him being the third overall pick, could have gone 1-1. In that draft.
A lot of people expected to.
And so for him to have that pedigree and then just to do nothing would just be another stain on the Rockies' history as a franchise. Yeah. And you don't want that. And I hope that pressure doesn't fall on him. Everything that he can come back healthy and just do his thing, start hitting some taters, and work his way up.
Yeah, and you never hope a prospect doesn't make it. You root for everybody in a way, but it's just one that it felt like such a safe bet as a hitter that I think everybody was pretty elated with this match between the Rockies and Condon. And it could ultimately just be an inauspicious start. A couple of months, some weird lingering injuries, and then he took off and everything was good from there. Totally real possibility. Honestly, kind of what you hope and expect for is just, okay, he's good now. Now we can really see the guy. But you're gun shy if you're the Rockies. And I think for fans of baseball that look at the Rockies, just as a neutral, you don't give them the benefit of the doubt. And you definitely know the stories of the Riley Pints not working out in Colorado. Or, you hear us bringing up Brendan Rodgers and how that flubbed and ultimately became a non-tender. And you worry. And you just worry that that's the outcome that would happen with the Rockies because they just operate so differently from everybody else that, yeah, of course they would have these problems because that's so Rockies. But you believe enough in everything you've seen in Condon up to this point to not just immediately hit the panic button. I'll say it that way.
Yeah. Still plenty of time. Luckily, it's early in his career, and
Go mash. If he just
could have been
goes and
much worse.
mashes, it'll all be fine.
Yeah, come back, hit a couple of homers, make some nice catches, put up a 300 average. Things will be good.
Yep.
We'll forget about that weird start.
Charlie Condon, the hitter, that's all anybody really cares about. So hopefully we get to see that start taking off soon. Probably in Spokane is what I would think to start the year.
And here's a question from Patrick Lyons. Got to wonder if the Rockies will back away from high-profile players going forward. Condon received a $9 million signing bonus. Below slot allows for spreading around money, quantity over quality. I think it just depends if it's the right fit or not.
That's a good point. I think that they were over the moon to see Condon still there. So I think it depends on the player at the spot at the time. But I think they're also clutching their pearls that Charlie Condon does not become an injury problem moving forward because they were that high on him from the get-go. So it's interesting, and we'll get to the draft as we get closer to it over time and some different strategies and stuff. But I think the Rockies felt in their heart of hearts that they were picking the best player available. And I'll never begrudge a franchise for going that direction.
Yeah. It's a gamble you take in the draft. That's just the way it is. And fortunately, all that money. They just don't like spending money.
No. But this is our first episode with the Dodgers in first place. How'd it feel?
No different than that's just our state of being, is the Dodgers are always in first, no matter what it is.
But now it's official.
I go apply for a job, and all of a sudden the Dodgers are in first. They get the job. But that'll do it here for this week's edition of Best of the West. Ran a little longer, but hey, there's a lot to talk about. And
so much fun.
Yeah, we get rolling here, and we appreciate those tuning in now during the live show or later during the action. You can find this episode on YouTube or later on your favorite podcasting platform later in the week. And yeah, there's always that gamble across the league. But Kenneth, where can the folks find you?
Yeah, I'll be over at Purple Row, and then you can find me on Twitter at KDub1988. And thanks to everybody who checked in again, as always.
You can find me over on Twitter at Skyler Timmins or over on Blue Sky at stimmins13.bsky.social. You can also, there's a little bit of bias there, Patrick, I would say. But we appreciate folks in the support. You can be sure to follow Blake Street Banner over on your favorite social media platform. Subscribe and like the episode here on YouTube. And be sure to follow them, and a lot of good stuff over at BlakeStreetBanner.com or on the YouTube page. A lot of banters and other such things you can find. And you can
check out Eli's story.
Yeah, there you go. And also go find me over on Purple Row, writing articles as well on fansfirstsports.com. A couple of places and all kinds of stuff. I'm always doing something. A lot of Rockies talk. Gotta do something. Need something to do. But as always, appreciate you tuning in. This has been Best of the West. And remember, the best is yet to come.